This is the Milky Way, our galaxy. Our own solar system and our planet is located about approximately halfway between the center of the Milky Way and its edge, in an otherwise unremarkable and insignificant location. Now, while the Milky Way and our galaxy is vast by our comprehension, it's approximately 100,000 light years across. So it takes light 100,000 years to get from one side to the other. While it's vast for us, it is only one of an estimated 100 to 200 billion galaxies that exist in the universe. So if I wanted to show you all of those galaxies on this screen right now, our galaxy would look something like this. That is to say that the universe does not give a shit about us, about anything that we do, about anything that we don't do, or about anything that I'm going to talk to you about today. But it is important for us, Homo sapiens sapiens, one fragile species. We are a thin film of bacteria on a rock in a universe full of countless other rocks, some of which might be heading in our direction. So if a species finds itself in this situation, what should it do? Well, first of all, I think it should take great care of the rock that it already has, the only rock that it has, to keep that in pristine condition. And at the same time, simultaneously, it should try and find another suitable rock so that we can have our risk of extinction. Instead, what are we doing? We are navel-gazing with the luxury of spoiling our environment, creating climate change, and blowing each other up because we can't seem to decide which one of our magical sky fairies has the biggest cock. And we're doing all of this in a closed system, like a petri dish. Now, if you take a petri dish and you put some bacteria in it, and you give those bacteria some nutrients, and you seal that dish, the bacteria will grow in number. They will reproduce. They will grow at an exponential rate until their population reaches its most successful state right before they go extinct because of lack of resources. So, if I need to spell this out for you, the petri dish is Earth, and we are the bacteria. So the existential question for our species is, can we be cleverer than bacteria in a petri dish? Or will we reach for the next source of glucose and put it in our mouths? Right? In the past, this used to keep us alive. Today, it makes us obese. Will we seek the next hit of dopamine, no matter what the ramifications of doing that? So in other words, will we embrace our lower order evolutionary traits? Because we're doing this. Or will we embrace our higher order evolutionary traits? Because we have those also. We build communities. We care and love one another. We care for each other. Will we embrace those? Because that is the core decision we're faced with. One leads to that petri dish. The other, I believe, will lead to a future where our species can meet its potential and exceed its potential. But today, it seems as if we're going towards that empty petri dish. I keep hearing that we're living in a post-expert, post-fact, post-truth world. That is a euphemism for extinction. A post-expert, post-fact, post-truth world, is a post-human world that we're talking about. As Kenneth Boulding says, anyone who believes in indefinite growth in anything physical on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist. And if you're called an economist today, we listen to you, right? And this is what our core economic system is built on. And what has it created in terms of what is the world like today? Well, we live in a world where 62 individuals, 62 people, have as much wealth as half of the world's poorest population combined. 62 people have as much wealth as 3.5 billion people in the world today. Now, this is 62. We can visualize it. You can imagine it. 62 people would fit into one double-decker bus in London with space left over. Here's my challenge to you. Imagine what 3.5 billion looks like. You can't. It's so far beyond the Dunbar number that we cannot even visualize it. And that is systemic inequality. This is the existential threat for our species today. So, but let's say that you are one of those 62 people. Lucky you, right? First of all, congratulations. What should you do if you're one of those 62? Well, for one thing, you have a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of people out there that don't have much, right? So you should probably build some walls around you. Thick, tall, right? Just it's a precaution, right, guys? And I would suggest you should probably keep an eye on all of these other people just to make sure that they're not up to no good, right? They're sneaky, they might be trying something. And we do this today in the physical space, but we also do this in digital space as well. And maybe that's okay. As I mentioned earlier, many of us seem to be fine with the idea of a magical, all-seeing, all-knowing white guy that lives on a cloud. Many of us are okay with that. Is it too much of a stretch to think that we might be okay with maybe a slightly less magical, all-seeing white guy that lives on a cloud? Maybe not. And of course, when that guy, when Mark Zuckerberg says privacy is dead, right? Very famous, privacy is dead. He's talking about your privacy. Because his privacy is alive. Because when he buys a house, he buys the 4 houses around it as well to protect his privacy. Because his privacy is not dead, right? When Mark uses a computer, he tapes up his camera and he tapes up his microphone. Because his privacy is very important. But your privacy is also very important to Mark. Because violating your privacy is how Mark makes money, right? It's Facebook's core business to violate your privacy, to track you, to profile you, and to monetize you, to trade in you. And it's not just Facebook. Nearly every website today has this business model. And I know this firsthand because I run a tiny, tiny social enterprise in Malmö. It's me, Laura, and our dog Oscar. And we block this tracking. We protect people as they are browsing the web. So in order to do that, I had to find these trackers. So I have a script that I wrote that goes through the Alexa top 1 million domains and pulls out all of the trackers, all of these bugs that they use to spy on you. And we rank them as well. So we rank the sites depending on how many trackers that they have. How many do you think the worst site on the internet, how many trackers do you think they have? I'll tell you what the site is. It's a site called LifeBuzz. This is the one we found, at least. And they got our Cloud of Shame award because they have, 10, 20 trackers, 30 third-party trackers, maybe, right? Maybe they're really evil. No. They have 172 trackers on this one site. Now, what does this mean in real terms? There are 172 through two third parties who are spying on you when you go to this one site, right? What does that mean in real terms? Well, it means that if we block this, the site becomes 4 times lighter. You save about 2.5 megabytes every time you load that site. It also means that it becomes about 16 times faster. You save about 2 minutes of loading. It doesn't take 2 minutes for you to see it. You see it before that, but it keeps loading. And you save 2 minutes of that. So what does that mean, though? All right, 2 minutes, 2 megabytes. It doesn't sound great, but it's not terrible, right? I mean, well, they're a very popular site, as they like to brag, because they need to sell you to their customers. So they need to tell their customers how popular they are with you, right? So this site gets 250 million page views a month. They also give you statistics about how many of those people are from the US, how many of them are on mobile phones. So using this, we were able to calculate that LifeBuzz, this one site, costs American mobile phone users $4 million a month in data charges, because they pay by gigabyte there. $4 million in total every month in data charges just to load the trackers, not the rest of the site. The rest of the site is clickbait, so it's not great, but to load their trackers. And it's not just them. So this is Forbes.com, the magazine, the journalistic site, right? And they have a door slam. The moment you go on, you don't see the content, you see their door slam. Even before you can get through this door slam, interstitial, I think they call it, you've been exposed to 40 third-party sites. That's even before you've seen the content, right? And if you try to protect yourself from this by using, for example, Better, which is our blocker, you would see this in the past. They would say, please stop protecting yourself from our tracking, or else you can't see our site, right? And what happened when they did this? People turned off their content blockers, and almost immediately they were hit by an attack of malvertising, of people's machines were infected from Forbes, from their advertising network. Now, Wired does the same thing. And it's very similar, isn't it? Wired still does this. It's similar because these companies all belong to the Interactive Advertising Bureau, right? All members. And the Interactive Advertising Bureau, which is the trade group for behavioral advertisers, for people who track you and profile you, actually tells them that they should be doing this. They have a deal, right? Of course, we block their blockers. It's a fun little game. So they block our blocker, we block their blocker, and then, you know. But I have absolutely no patience with this cat and mouse game, and we're not going to play it, especially since we know how it ends, right? So we created a new policy. It's called 3 strikes and you're off the web. And here's how it works. Strike 1, you have a website, you're tracking people, you're profiling them, you're farming them. Okay, we'll block you from doing that, so we'll protect them. Strike 2, you detect and block our ability to protect them. So if we can trivially block your blocker, we will. But we don't have time for, you know, if you're very clever. Instead, we'll spend that time, strike 3, to remove you from the web. So instead, we will spend that time to block you on every other site, links to your site, on every other search engine, so that for people who are protecting themselves with Better, at least, your site will not exist on the web. And that in chess is called checkmate. So we know how this ends, right? So it's a silly game. Let's stop playing it. And you know, they stopped doing this. Forbes does not block you anymore, blockers. But there still are cloud of shame this month. And there's a reason for that. It's that initial door slam that you saw. Because it makes you wait for 3 seconds before you can hit that button to continue to the site. Now it takes about, let's say it's a fast connection, a second to load. You have lightning fast reflexes. It takes you a second to hit the button and to find it. Let's say very conservatively, it takes people 5 seconds because Forbes decided to put this door slam to get past it. 5 seconds, nothing, right? Come on, what's 5 seconds? I mean, of course, they have their trackers, etc., but that's not the reason they are our cloud of shame. It's this interstitial. What's 5 seconds? Nothing. Until, again, you look at how popular this site is. They boast that they get over 46 million unique visitors a month. Let's be conservative again and say that those people only go there once a month and only lose 5 seconds. When you calculate this, it comes out that this one door slam interstitial costs over 7 years of human life every month in total. Over 87 years of human life a year is lost, 5 seconds at a time. Very conservatively, that's a lifetime. This business model has ramifications, real externalities, real effects on humanity. But don't worry, because you can skip it, right? You don't have to actually lose those 5 seconds if you're a robot. The only thing you need to do is to pretend that you're the Google bot. Because if you're the Google bot, you get shown directly to the content. Because Forbes respects Google, they just don't respect you. And why, you might ask? I mean, Forbes are journalists, right? Why are all of these news sites doing these? They're journalists. It's a free press. Not really. That's not their business. Axel Springer is one of the biggest publishers in Europe, and their lawyers in a lawsuit recently said the core business of the plaintiff is to deliver ads to its visitors. Journalistic content is just a vehicle to get visitors to view the ads. So what business are they in? Is it journalism? No, it's behavioral advertising. What is journalism today? It's bait to get you there. So this, of course, is the business model of the cloud. But if you think about it, there is no such thing as the cloud. As the Free Software Foundation says, there are only other people's computers. So we're using other people's computers. So it's not just websites. Everything from your smart television to your smart watch to your smart car today works by collecting data about you. That's how they work. This is not the problem in and of itself. This is a fact of life. This is how modern technology works. The real question is, who owns and controls this data? If it's you as an individual, there's no problem. It's a democracy that we're living in. But if the answer is it's corporations that own and control this data, and by extension that this data is made available to government agencies as well, then we have a very different type of social system that we're talking about, a corporatocracy. And don't worry, we don't have to make this decision today, because we already made this decision decades ago. Today, all of our data is owned and controlled by corporations. We're not sleepwalking into anything. There's not the danger that we might reach somewhere. We are there today. So what do we do? What do we do going forward is the real question. So you've probably heard of the Matrix. The Matrix almost got it right. Almost. They got it completely backwards, though. In the Matrix, people live in virtual space while being farmed from physical space, from tangible space. Today, we live in a world, we live in a tangible space while being farmed from virtual space. So we live today in the matrix, inverted. We call them server farms. If you stop to think, what is it that they're farming? The answer is us. So when I see tweets, for example, that say, hey, look, it's so cool, Facebook's got a new research and development arm, I'm just like, do you understand that you are the livestock praising the new equipment in the factory farm? That is what you're doing, right? When Facebook and Google improve their products, it's like the massage that we give to Kobe beef. It's not for the benefit of the cow. It's to make the cow a better product. That's why they improve their products, right? We have to understand core things, like what is data? Because in Silicon Valley, we call it the new oil, we call it an asset. Well, let's think about it. If I have a little figurine, right, a little statue, and I have enough data about it, I can take a 3D printer and I can make a copy of this statue, right? So imagine what I can do if I have enough data about you. Hint, I don't want to 3D print you. But imagine what I can do, because data about a thing, if you have enough of it, starts to approach the thing itself. Data about people is people. When we start talking about data about people, we need to start talking about people instead of using the euphemism data. Now, in the past, we had a business, a very successful business, of selling people, of selling people's bodies. We called it slavery, right? And unfortunately, it still exists. So what do we call the business of selling everything, of trading in everything else about a person that makes them what they are, apart from their physical selves? In last year's New Scientist, I called it people farming. In last month, sorry. Shoshana Zuboff from Harvard Business School calls it surveillance capitalism. And these two things are related, because the business model of mainstream technology under surveillance capitalism is to farm people. And it's toxic to our human rights, it's toxic to democracy. And to understand why, we have to understand what the self means in the digital era. This is you. And this is how we normally draw the boundaries of the self. And we have a whole body of laws, and we have a whole body of of knowledge, and we know how to execute these laws to protect the self. Now, what happens though when technology comes into the equation? Is our relationship with technology like this? If I have an idea and I want to write it down, do I tell my mobile phone, please write this down for me in the app? Or, if this is the case, then what is surveillance? Surveillance is what it's always been. Signals capture, message capture between two actors. But what if it's different? What if our relationship with technology is different? What if when I have an idea, what I do is I say, I want to store my idea not in my brain, but in my mobile phone, in my laptop. I want to extend my biological capabilities, my mind, myself, with my technology. If that's the case, it would make perfect sense to extend the boundaries of the self to include the technologies by which we extend ourselves. And in which case, surveillance is no longer signals capture. Surveillance is an assault on the self. And we know how to deal with assaults on the self. We already know what human rights are and how to protect them. Some people say, oh, well, we understand that this is a problem with the government, but corporations are okay, right? Because they're so different, they're fighting for our rights. No. Corporations and governments might play this good cop, bad cop in public, but they have so much more in common. The reason they're competing is they're competing for an asset, you. The reason corporations are taking on governments is because they want to protect their asset, your data. You are their asset. Like Bruce Schneier said, the NSA didn't just wake up and say, let's spy on everybody. They looked up and said, wow, corporations are spying on everybody. Let's get ourselves a cut. There are revolving doors. Jeff Bezos and Eric Schmidt work for the Pentagon today. These are billionaire monopolists who work for the Pentagon. Peter Thiele was up at the Republican National Convention endorsing Donald Trump for president. Barack Obama says that when he leaves the White House, he wants to be a venture capitalist. Do you see the revolving doors? Because they're revolving quite quickly. In Europe, Oettinger, who's supposed to be in the European Commission looking after our digital rights, calls people who care about net neutrality Taliban-like. And why is that? Could it have anything to do with the fact that Oettinger's donut is very red? This donut shows you the number of lobbyists that he meets with. And look at the top lobbyists he's meeting with: Google, Microsoft, Telefonica. So does it make sense if he's meeting with all of these lobbyists that the laws that they pass will be in their interests? This is institutional corruption. And if we let secretive trade deals like TTIP and TPP pass with investor-state dispute settlement clauses, which means that corporations have a right to veto the decisions taken by democratic governments to protect their citizens when they don't benefit the investors of the companies, well, this is going to be codified in law. If TTIP passes, that is the end of democracy, because we're talking about a feudal, a colonial system. How many of you have heard of free basics? Facebook, right? Facebook went to India and said, oh, you poor people, you can't afford the internet. We will bring you the internet. And there's an asterisk, though, right? Whenever the white man brings the fire, there's always a little asterisk, and you have to read the terms and conditions. And the terms and conditions said, hey, it's not the full internet, it's the Facebook net. So it's Facebook plus a few other sites, and it means that we spy on you, right? And India, you know, very politely said, no, thank you. We don't want that. The price of being poor, the price of not being able to afford this doesn't mean that you get to spy on us and colonialize us. And what did Silicon Valley say? Here's Mark Andreessen. He said, anti-colonialism has been economically catastrophic for the Indian people for decades. Why stop now? Anti-colonialism. He really hates it, because if you're a colonialist, you don't like anti-colonialism, right? So we have to tackle this problem at its core. And the core is the startup. That's where it begins. When Mark has his idea for this startup, he goes to a venture capitalist. That's a photo. They actually look like that. I don't know if you can see it's not an illustration. And he says, hey, in 5 years' time, I might have 100 million people using my platform if I'm successful. How much money will you give me for them today, even before I built it? And the venture capitalist says, well, I'll give you 5 million because I know that if you can do this, you might fail, but if you can do this, then I'm going to make a lot more money, right? And that's the sale. In our system, the sale happens at the beginning. A venture capitalist does not invest in your business. They invest in your exit, in the sale of your business. Now, Mark has a huge task in front of him. He has to convince you to come onto his network, use his network, build his network, so that he can get the network effects. He has to convince you that he's never sold you and that he won't sell you, right? And, oh, what's happening here? Right, it looks like we have a breaking news update. We have a new social network this week. It's amazing. It's called Hello. Who's heard of Hello? It's a new social network. It's a new kind of social network. But you know what's not different? The business model. They are at this stage right now, right? So now you can decide, do you want to help them build this network so they can become the next Facebook? They've already sold you, right? Or do you want to say no, thank you? This is the only point where you have any power. You can kill Hello today, or you can make it into the next Facebook. That's up to all of us to decide what we do. So back to our regular programming. This is the con, because he did con us, right? He said, oh yeah, and we were like, oh yeah, Mark, let's use it, it's great. And then what happens? A few years pass, it's successful, the venture capitalist comes back, and there is an IPO or an acquisition, right? And this is what a startup is. A startup is not any new company, right? It's a very specific type of company. It's a Silicon Valley brand. It's a disposable business. Let's build stay-ups, sustainable, long-term businesses. Let's create ethical technologies. Technologies that at their core respect human rights. Technologies that respect human effort and human experience. So that when Facebook says, hey, if you want to share your photo with your friend, you must share it with me first. We can say, that's bullshit, Facebook. That doesn't have to be the way we build it. If you want to share your photo with your friend, you can share your photo with your friend directly. We don't need you in the middle. There's no technical reason for you to be there. It's just your business model. So here's my 3-step plan that I'm going to leave you with for what we can actually do today. 1, we need to recognize cyborg rights for people. We need to legally recognize our cybernetic nature, that we use technology to extend our biological selves. So we must extend the rights of the self to our extended selves. And we must recognize people farming as a violation of that basic human right. And we must legislate and regulate accordingly. 2, in the EU, we must cut support for startups. I'm not talking about every new technology company. I'm talking about the Silicon Valley brand, startup, with venture capital, people farming, and everything that I've talked about, right? We got to tell them, You know, your unicorns are shitting in our backyard and we don't want them to anymore, right? And we have to do that at every level. So we can't have people in the European Commission who are acting like cheerleaders for Silicon Valley. We can't have them doing that in Amsterdam, right? And number 3, we need to create a European technology commons. We need to create an EU-level fund so that we can subsidize alternative independent technologies that are free and open, zero knowledge, and decentralized, and which you cannot gate off, which you cannot privatize, so that we build a healthy commons. This is in the interests of our species going forward. Because I'm going to leave you with this. Because what we've done today is this. We've planted a bullshit seed, right? And we got a bullshit tree. And then we climbed up into the branches, and now we're wondering, why does the fruit taste like bullshit? Well, there's a reason for that, because bullshit fruit is the only kind of fruit you get from a bullshit tree, right? Now, some of us who benefit greatly from this system feel that if they decorate the tree, it will mask the taste and the smell of the fruit, but it doesn't. Some of us who actually deeply care about this feel that if we just prune the branches, we will fix the problem, but it doesn't change the nature of the tree. So here's what I think we should do. Some of us, not all of us, should climb down from this tree, take a few steps to one side, and plant a new one based on reason, on equality, on democracy, and on social justice. And then we'll get a very different type of tree, one that we don't have to decorate, and one where the fruits are diverse, being based on these principles. But we can't stop there. We need to build a bridge between our tree and the bullshit tree so that everyone else can conveniently follow us through. So they don't have to go through what we went through because they may not be able to. Because that is the bridge between the centralized world of old and the decentralized world that we must move towards. A world built on reason, on human rights, on democracy and social justice. A future where mankind, when humankind, can reach its potential. Because this is the world that I want to live in. This is the world that I believe we deserve. And this is the world that I challenge us to build. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.